Good morning. I wanted to come on and make a video about the ego, what it is, different schools of thought around the ego, and what it is to me and how I'm choosing to work with it presently. So the ego, as far as definitions go, could be referred to as anything from being big-headed about yourself or being overly prideful, or it could be something more similar to like your earthly identification. If you think of your soul as one aspect of you and your ego as another aspect of you that's more down here on earth. For me, I think of the ego more as a bodyguard, or even more accurately, as a suit of armor. So throughout our lives, we experience wounding. We experience wounding as a result of things like abuse, neglect, having a loss early in our childhood or during our formative years, or even things like codependency, codependency would be something like being born into a family or into some kind of living situation, whether it's family or community related or even school, where you were taught to chronically, over the long term, neglect yourself in order to appease and peacekeep for the people around you. So as a result of these few different things, and there are more, I'm sure, there are different ways to be wounded and be traumatized throughout our life, we adopt an ego. We start to build up this really protective bodyguard. Oftentimes the ego is looked at something that's totally bad and totally wrong, but like, ego is just one of our earliest coping mechanisms. There's nothing wrong or bad about it. It's just at a certain point, if I've put on a suit of armor, that suit of armor is going to start to get in the way of things. It may have had a really noble purpose in the past, but at a certain point, that suit of armor is going to be restricting my mobility, making me feel less free, and I'm going to be looking for ways to take this suit off, but I'm just so used to it. And even to the point where we have this ego, we have this suit of armor, and we're not even always really able to see where it is, what it's touching, and how do I get out of this? It's like wearing a ball gown. Like, how the hell do you get this thing off? So anyway, one of my friends turned me on to a book, and I haven't read it, so I'm not going to speak at length about it. But basically this book was about helping you turn and face the puppet master, that puppet master that controls things behind the scenes. So oftentimes part of our ego is parts of us that were kind of shamed into silence, where if you were like, for example, a really rambunctious kid, you might have had the teacher in class slapping you on the wrist. I'm a millennial, so like we weren't still wrist slapping when I went to school, but like telling you to sit down, telling you to get quiet, or like you go home to your parents and they're like, sit down, do the homework, get yourself under control, or you're going in a timeout, or you're getting a spanking, or whatever happened to go on in your household. So this really rambunctious kid who's really outspoken, really vibrant, gets conditioned to suppress parts of themselves and like put on a suit of armor where they might be like, no, I've grown out of that. I'm not interested in having attention. I'm not interested in speaking up for myself or having a voice. And this person might genuinely believe it, but again, like donning a suit of armor, there's going to be a point where that's not helpful to you, and you need to start to speak up for yourself and start to use your voice. I'm sorry, my doggie is crying in the background. Come here, come sit with me. So anyway, oftentimes when you go through things like life coaching, or maybe some of the more culty training programs, they don't have to be cults. I've been through plenty of them. They're not all cults. Some of them, you really get a lot out of. But often these programs will prompt you to look at something specific that you want to change, such as relationship patterns, or why do I keep encountering the same kind of experience? Why does the same thing continue to happen to me? And they'll prompt you to look at your ego and the ways in which you are protecting yourself and therefore creating this kind of dynamic that's perpetually playing out for you. So this book in particular, I thought gave a really palatable approach to looking at the ego, looking at the part of ourself that is controlling us like a puppet, that really protective armor, but nevertheless controlling us like a puppet, and making it more palatable to turn around and actually look at the puppet master, and to look at the painted nails of the puppet master, look at the eyes of the puppet master, instead of just being like, oh, there's a part of me that I don't want to be a bad person, I don't want to be bad or wrong, and and that's your glance that you take at the ego. This book takes a different approach where it encourages you to turn so far into your ego to look at it, to really observe that puppet master, that you get to see exactly what all of the kickbacks are for continuing to engage in that pattern. I'll give an example from my life. Commitment scares the shit out of me. It scares me to the point that when I finally decided that I wanted to do that traditional life thing of getting married and getting the house and doing all that stuff, I chose a partner that was completely emotionally unavailable, okay? And the interesting thing was, I was always so angry about him being emotionally unavailable, not noticing that I was an exact replica of that same level of emotional unavailability. I chose someone, nice as he might be, who I couldn't go deep with, who, if we broke up, there were things that I would miss, but it wouldn't feel like I never really had to open my heart, okay? I never really had to open my heart because there wasn't much of a connection there in the first place. And it was kind of like a safe space for me where I could keep my suit of armor on and still kind of be going through the motions, and in the beginning still be comfortable enough in my suit of armor that I didn't have to turn and look at myself, or I didn't have to turn and look at the things in my life that made me so terrified of commitment, or of opening up to people, or of trusting someone else. So I was married at 25. I'm in my 30s now. I'll be 34 in a couple months. And it's been a long journey. That marriage did break down. It got a lot worse. My level of stubborn was almost to the point where the universe was like, you don't want to look at yourself? Okay. We're going to level you. We're going to make things so terribly uncomfortable, so bad, that for me, I did not feel like, where I always kind of felt like I was boxed into that marriage, now it was the complete other end of the spectrum, where it's like, I can no longer not face myself. I can no longer not go on the spiritual journey, because I am so miserable that if I go all in on my spiritual journey, I will either get to a point where I'm healed and Christed and happy and content, or I'll at least get to the point where I end up with the things that I actually do want. I'll end up with that deeply fulfilling relationship. I'll end up, with the happy that my ego was trying to produce for me, but was going about it, in the wrong way, in a way that ultimately wouldn't get me all the way there. So I didn't give the name of the book. It's called Existential Kink, but I'll give an example. I'm going to continue with that example of fear and commitment. So one way of looking at the ego, looking at your own ego and the and the kickbacks that you get from choosing the patterns, you know, consciously or unconsciously that we do, is we're getting something out of it, okay? That ego and that suit of armor gets to feel really nice when it's being affirmed. So here's my example with fear of commitment. There is a part of me that loves rejecting commitment, because if I reject commitment, I get to stay in control. And if I reject committing to certain things, then I never need to be vulnerable. I never need to put myself out there, and I can always be safe and protected by choosing not to commit to things. I never ever need to feel let down or disappointed. I never need to worry about being rejected. I never need to worry about someone seeing the real me and not liking it. I never need to risk putting myself in a place where I feel inadequate, okay? So that's a bigger example for fear and commitment. If I don't do commitment, I get to stay safe, okay? The thing is, if if I never take that risk, I also don't get the thing that my soul wants a little bit more than just being protected. And the interesting thing about something like that, where I get this, staying safe is a nice kickback. It's really nice. But it doesn't, at this point, seem like it's going to be as nice as risking it and having a nice relationship and opening up my heart and learning how to do things like tell the truth about things that I like or my preferences or who I think is a good partner to me or who's not. And the other interesting thing about not turning around to look at that puppet master is, if I continue to go on that loop, that armor's getting thicker and thicker and thicker. Because regardless of whether I have enjoyed the relationships I've been in or not, I am still a human. So if I'm refusing to go into deeply committed relationships, I still need people around. And that means that I'm engaging with surface level commitments that, you know, really aren't deeply fulfilling for me or for the person that I'm with. And ultimately, it's leading me down a path where any bit of emotional investment that I can give is going to end in disaster and heartbreak anyway. And that coat of armor is gonna get thicker and thicker and thicker, because my ego is gonna be like, see, all men are assholes, see, don't you see? Like, of course you shouldn't trust people. So at this point, I feel very interested in continuing with this process of making the ego so tasty and so palatable that if you can play this game and actually think about looking at your ego as a game, as something of fun, play this game of saying, I really love not committing and being safe, or like whatever the thing is for you, we get so much more out of it than just living that same miserable cycle. So I'm gonna leave this video here. I hope that's been helpful. Let me know. I love you guys. You're so wonderful, you're so special, and I will see you very soon.